So today we have Sophie Eakins, right? Did I say it right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Sophia Eakins. Let me get that straight. So she's, for those of you, for people to know who are listening to us, you joined us really early on. I think it was like 2021 when we were still Kriolish with a C before we transitioned to the K. So you were a big part of this for really early on and set a lot of things, a lot of good stuff in stone for us that we're still, that we still use today, especially with the social media stuff that now I have a grip on. But just so everybody our listeners, so they have an idea, right now you are visiting assistant professor of linguistics at the Western Washington University. You recently completed your PhD at the University of Michigan, where your research focused on especially on how language lives and changes in the New England diaspora, which is very very interesting. I like the concept of lives and changes because that's what happens with Criolu usually, or anybody's language when you are in the diaspora. And
Mm-hmm.
you are a rare bridge between science of linguistics and the heart of what happens in communities of diaspora, in this case, the Cabo Verdean community. And today, basically, we're going to talk about your research, your experience right now as assistant professor, and even, your experience when you first started, here in what started with us with Criolish and actually and also taking our Santiago course. So we go into all of that stuff. So this is going to be very, very exciting. Um, so welcome once again to the Kriolish podcast. Our new adventure of doing different things. Before you left, we didn't have any of this set up, but I know everybody now has a podcast. Like I like to say, it's like having an email address now. So it's
It's
like,
true. It's true.
don't you have a podcast? It's like now if I feel like people are gonna frown upon you if you do not have a podcast. So yes, but for us, this is good because we get to talk about what happens internally with Criolish. We get to invite folks like you to join us. We have other people that eventually will be part of the podcast. But it makes a big difference when people really understand what happens from on the inside of a startup or any company of this caliber, and then for people from the outside to also come in and give us their thoughts and how they feel about what we do. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
first would like to get you going on how did you first come across Criolish when we were with Criolish with a C, and
Oh,
how did all of
yeah.
this started, and why did you join us? Because you're a young buck. You were
Yeah,
quite
I
young.
think yeah, it was in 2021 I remember because I was still I was a remote student because it was school was all online, and it was the first year of my PhD actually, um, that I came across Criolish. Um, but I think it all started. I guess I'll start also by saying that I did start pretty early looking at the Cabo Verdean community in New England. So I knew pretty early on that that was something that interests me a lot, and that I wanted to maybe look into for my PhD. I had no idea that I was going to be doing that for the next 5 years of my life, but that was sort of an initial, always a curiosity for me, because I studied in undergrad in Boston, which is where I first got um, sort of connected with the Cabo
Exposed.
Verdean community, exposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask. I'm like, it's not every day that somebody's like, "Huh, I'm gonna do my PhD in Cabo Verdean Creole." So I was gonna ask, like, how did that really become a thing? Because PhD is no joke, right? It's a good part of consumes a lot of your time. It's a lot
Yeah.
of dedication. You have to have some type of love for what you're doing or whatever to keep you going. So definitely, how did you end up saying, "This is what I want to look into for my PhD"?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that you have to have interest in, but I think also at the same time, it has to be like a cool and interesting topic. And for me, when um, having, been connected already, been kind of interacting with Cabo Verdeans in New England, specifically in Boston, was where um, I worked for a summer camp that was in Dorchester.
Oh,
And yeah, um,
explains a whole lot.
which is sort of how that happened. And yeah, you just like talk to a lot of Cabo Verdeans, and anytime that happens, you're going to be talking about language and hearing about their language and also their experience in Boston, especially. Um, and so I was like, oh well, I already knew that. Also, I was interested in sort of Creole languages more broadly.
Broadly.
And so I was sort of sitting there like, okay, if I wanted to look at this language topic, like what kind of community would I find interesting? What community might I already have some connections in? Um, and that was sort of done and done for me. Um, so I was like, all right, let's go. 5 years. 5 years spending a good, 2 to 4 months in Boston and beyond, talking with Cabo Verdeans, and it's been awesome. Yeah.
And then like with the Criolish part, did that make you think like, okay, maybe this organization can help me get closer to the language? Because I'm going to
Yeah.
assume you did not speak Creole before you made the
No.
decision. And so that's just an interesting part of doing research on, with a language that you cannot, that you can't speak basically. It's like, okay, I'm going to do some research on it. How did you find it in a sense of, okay, where are the resources? Like, how do I get there? How do I get started on, with this research? And when did Criolish come in to help? Because you were with us for like a good year and a half, maybe two. So that was
Yeah. I
so
think it was
that was a
like
serious commitment.
I know. Again, it's like I mean, Soily, you of all people would know, you just kind of, you get started with something and then all of a sudden you find like you're doing 10
You're like,
different
why?
things
Yes,
and you've been
yes,
doing it
yes.
for 10 years. Yeah.
You're like, why am I still here?
Um, Soily's like, I don't know how I got into this podcast. Like, I know exactly how you got into this podcast. Um, but yeah, no, I think for me it was probably just kind of like a couple different parts of who I am as a person, which is one, I really love learning languages, which is a lot of linguists. You get into it because of your love of language. And so in wanting to study the language, I also wanted to learn it. Um, and I don't know if it was my advisor. So my advisors at Michigan, one of my advisors was Cabo Verdean, um, is Cabo Verdean, Dr. Marlise Baptista.
Oh, yes. I forgot about that detail.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes. And I don't
Important
remember,
detail.
yes, important detail. I don't remember if she connected me with, or if she recommended some people to reach out to. Probably, she's definitely the one that got me connected with Inez
Direito. Uh-huh.
Brito. Um, but also with Carlos Almeida, because he was teaching community college or something, and because it was
Yeah, at Bristol.
COVID.
He teaches at Bristol Community
Yeah, and because it
College.
was COVID, I could take it online. Um, and so I was taking that language research, and I was talking also with Kriolish, and I was, sitting there in kind of a unique situation because most of his students were Cabo Verdean, and they had much more sort of access to language and experience than I did. And I was sitting there like, is there a dictionary? Like, how do I go about doing this? And he actually said, well, I think I know somebody that's working on a dictionary. You should get in touch with Admar. Um, and so I was like, oh, okay. And so that was how I first got in touch with Admar, um, who was indeed working on like a dictionary, which is now Criolish
Yes, so
translations.
yes.
Um, but it was me kind of at first just wanting to learn the language and getting in touch with people, but also a lot of research is making connections, and when you are going to be researching a community, it's very important to like be communicating with people in the
Yes.
community. Um, and I also I've talked a lot, especially recently with people about how I do also have like I think my love of language and linguistics, what brought me to linguistics was pretty equally like just loving language and loving learning about language and like kind of the theory of language and structures and like kind of all the more like aspects
Nerdy
of
stuff?
linguistics. Yeah, the nerdy stuff. Um, I'm like split between I love that and I love the like applications of linguistics, which is things like, making, encouraging awareness of, you know, like certain, like for instance, Creole languages, like in making people more aware of what Creoles are, kind of their history, um, and some of these, yeah, like applications of linguistics. And so when I was able to connect with a community that would help me with my research, or connect with a group that would maybe help me with my research,
Hmm.
which is Kriolish, but also would allow me to like have that other experience that I love, which is, making an impact and like being a part of something that would make an impact using language. Um, I was like, yeah, sign me up.
Yes. And we were like, yes, we would love to have a linguistics linguistic with us because I mean, obviously, Matt and I are, as you know, we're native speakers, but it's a whole different ball game when you understand the logic behind languages and how, because once you live it, you're with it. Nobody not sitting around talking about how the language come about and why it is the way it is or why it works this way in the diaspora and not. And both Matt and I, having lived in Boston and being raised there, obviously we also have the component of the diaspora, of speaking Cabo Verdean Creole and between retaining it and experience the change and whatnot. So just having you on board was a big deal for us to, any little questions, anything we had in mind or something we wanted to do. Obviously, we tap into your experience and the work we already had done to better understand how some of these things work and how we were moving forward. Because now, being a ed tech company,
Mm-hmm.
we're in a completely different level now. But all of that really happened because we at the base at the start we had folks like you and Nezi and Carlos Almeida, all of them, they were a big part of how we started. Getting the expertise in early on really matters, and it still does, obviously, but the early stages so that we understand how to push what we want and what we still want to do with with Criolish. And the big part of all this as well is having research done so people can understand certain things, and you have the old school group of folks who've been around, Manuel Gonzalez, he has a dictionary, the Carlos and the Nazis, they've been around for a while, and Lizette Lima, they've been around for a while pushing all of this work, but they're a much older generation, right? They're our parents, Matt and I's parents generation. Now we're the next generation bringing in technology to change how things are seen or understand how all of this come together. But the research with folks like such as yourself still needs to happen, right? Because now you're in a different, because the research is always going to continue. The Creole languages and how things change in the diaspora was one thing when I went in '94 to Boston. Now it's a whole different ball game for kids arriving in the United States now, as as immigrants, because they have access to technology in a completely different way, even to learn English and all of that stuff. So it's very different, and the need for the research to continue is always going to be there in my view. So I wanted to ask you, like, how was it to actually do the research? I know you did it in Boston. You also did in Brockton. Did you
Mm-hmm.
in Brockton? You went to Amherst, which oddly enough has a whole population a small. I
Yeah,
went to UMass
that was sort
Amherst,
of
so there's
random.
like a whole, yes, it's random in a way, but not at the same time because UMass Amherst, a huge population of Cabo Verdean students
Yeah,
go there to study.
yeah,
So but then a community came from that. So like the oldest Cabo Verdean, Cape Verdean Student Alliance (CVSA) was
right.
started at UMass Amherst in 1982. So it's been in a way, it's not that surprising that a community eventually formed at Amherst, but most people won't be like, "What do you mean Amherst? It's like, what's going on?" But it's
Yeah.
because of UMass, you know, because of UMass Amherst, where Matt and I went to in our in-house linguistics now, which is Brandon. He also attended UMass Amherst. So tell me a little bit more about what was that experience, really getting into the field, and because your research is very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I say random too because I was I did go back one year I went back deliberately to go to Amherst for uh getting connected with like the CVSA and stuff like that. Um But I was also it was funny because I was living at Amherst one summer. I don't even know if you know this, Swaley, but
No.
I think you were we were still doing stuff. But I was living at Amherst there was a linguistics institute at University of Massachusetts Amherst. So um that part was funny because it was just like a different thing that I was doing there, but then it was convenient for me because I was also able to do like my field work and my research while I was at this like linguistics institute. Um, but anyways, so yeah, so I did 4 summers. I went out to Boston and sort of the surrounding area to do my research. And um, yeah, I can talk a little bit about what I was interested in, like kind of that process. But essentially what I found in sort of my approach to research that I developed as I went a little bit, but what I found to be the most effective is um, kind of what I was talking about, becoming interacting with the community, and especially as someone that is not Cabo Verdean myself, really using the community as like my baseline knowledge source um, of like what are the interesting and important aspects to study. Instead of sort of me coming in as an outsider, having like, I don't know, read a paper or, you know, 3 or 5, and saying like, oh, I heard in this paper that X happens in the language. Like this is going to be what I'll study because I'm sure that this is what's happening because I read this paper. Um, I found that, you know, through trial and error, that was not the correct approach. Um, in fact, it worked a lot better if you went to the community themselves and you asked them, hey, what do you notice in the language? What do you think is
Hmm.
interesting and important to study in the language? Because then once you do the research, you have the likelihood that those things that the people that you were talking to noticed, the likelihood that those are going to be kind of like the features that actually you can kind of like do research and experiments on and that'll work becomes much higher. Whereas if I go in and I'm like, I don't know, I read that this vowel is different from this vowel, and then you like go into the community and you say like, wait, why aren't they doing the thing that I read about? And it's like, well, maybe that wasn't as apparent to them as it was to you as an outsider reading about it. Um, and so what I did was I did that sort of first round where I was like, all right, as community members, what do you think is interesting and important to study about the diaspora? And Swaley, we've talked about, and with Admar, we've talked a lot about this, but like one of the biggest things that Cabo Verdeans will tell you about is the variation.
Yes.
Um,
Everybody's
and
favorite topic.
yeah, because it's incredible and
It-
it's fascinating and really cool. And
I agree.
so I was sitting there like, okay, I do find really interesting this, you know, contact between Criolu and English, but also there's this really interesting contact going on in the diaspora just between the different varieties of Criolu. Um, and um, and as someone who I'm a phonetician, so I study sound. As someone who's very interested in
Oh.
sound, I was interested in kind of learning what's the sound change, like how are people's productions of sound maybe changing as a result of contact between the different varieties of Criolu. And so eventually, I kind of found my way to the topic that turned into my large chunk of my dissertation.
It's like I feel like you probably have room for like a second and third continuation because even within the different within the islands, it will matter where you're from. Just like in the US, we have the
Right.
North and the South and the West, and some people talk fast, other people talk slow, and whatnot. It's same thing happens with our Creole. Like you can be from one island and you're from one particular part of the island, north, south, west. It's going to change the way that you speak. So I feel like if somebody decides to say I'm going to study Santo Town, San Vicente, all of the islands, Santiago, Brava, if they decide to do that, it will be a number of research because there's so much, even within each island, there's so much to it. And I think like in the diaspora, what ends up happening is because we end up coming together a lot more frequent in terms of people from different islands. Like I grew up in
Mm-hmm.
Sal, I'm from Sal, born and raised. I got exposed mainly to folks from the Northern Island because of internal migration, right? My dad is from San Cloud. My mom, I'm fifth generation born on the island of Sal, which is not as common, but you have a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
in Sal that are from the island of Boa Vista and San Cloud. And then if you go to the islands, you have San Vicente and Santo Antão. So folks from the north, and then my mom's father, he's from San Vicente. So us from the northern island, we had the tendency of being more connected than me being exposed from somebody from Santiago, from Fogo, Bravo, or Mayu. Like I barely interacted with them when I was um, growing up in Sal, but when I went to Boston, the first folks I interacted with were from Fogo, and I was like, oh my God, like, what is this? Like, it was the first time that I was at age 12 engaging with someone from Fogo, a few from Brava, but mainly from Fogo. And I was like, it was a new world to me at such a young
Mm-hmm.
age. And, I knew obviously of all the islands because you study history, you know the basics, but I had not at that age had not realized that our Creole could be that different in terms of the ones from the southern island. So the diaspora kind of has this amazing thing about bringing us together, be it in the U.S. or in Europe or elsewhere, where you get to see all of
Mm-hmm.
this variation coming into one place. So I wouldn't be surprised if
Mm-hmm.
some of the people you interviewed, the mom is from one island, the dad is from another island, and the grandmother, and you know what I mean, which if
Absolutely.
you were just in Cape Verde, you came to one island, chances are you were going to find, folks mainly from close islands and not from so much distance in terms of where one, a parent is from the other. Did you find some of that stuff? Like folks was like, oh, my mom is from this island, my dad is from that island, and their Creole even gets mixed whenever they're trying to speak it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, also I'll just say that that was absolutely one of the most interesting things for me too, is this idea that this group of islands that are normally, separated by an ocean, um, when you come to the diaspora and New England, like suddenly they're a couple streets away.
Yes.
So you have this like opportunity and this like setting for contact that just doesn't exist in Cabo Verde normally. Um, but yeah, I definitely had that, and I even I had to like control for that in my experiments because there was so much usually kind of yeah like
Variations going on.
variation that I was like, okay, I can't control for all of the variation, but I should, I will need to a certain level, make sure that if I'm interested in how a Fogu diasporan speaks, I'm not interviewing someone that like identifies as like, I mix, like I'm not, you know, I mix
One or
Fogu and
the other. Yes.
Santiago in every sentence, like then probably they would not be the ideal participant. But yeah, I definitely found
I would not have been an ideal subject because I was mixing Creole from Sal, from Fogo, from Praia, from Brava, and my Creole
that.
was a mess for a few years. Like every time I would come home for the holidays, my friends would be like, "What Creole are you speaking?" Because it was so much, the mixing was just there, like you couldn't help it. And I have the tendency of when I'm with someone from a particular island, I switch. So I do that switching in Creole. Like I'll switch to the
Mm-hmm.
for the person I'm speaking with, whatever island they're from. To me that's awesome. Like if I can do that, not everybody can. I know not everybody can do that, especially the difference between the north and the southern islands. But it's a natural thing for me, and I do it with other languages. Like if I'm speaking with someone from Portugal, from Brazil, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
from the United States, like I would just switch depending who, I'll do the switch depending who I'm speaking with. So even within Criolu, I have the tendency of doing that, but I think it's something that I learned how to do without realizing it because I ended up being exposed to so many people from different islands. Like you said, now we're down the street from each other, like in one place, whereas
Yeah.
before it wasn't, it wasn't the case. And speaking of switching, so code switching becomes it's a big part of folks in the diaspora. How did, of course, that was part of your research. How did you handle that as well? Like you said, it's a lot going on. Like, how do you keep control of all of these different things? Just keep, showing up as you started interviewing people in the community.
Um, yeah, so I when I first started, I was interested in the contact between Kriolu and English because there had been a little bit of work on that, and that was sort of one of the things that I was most exposed to when I was working in Dorchester. And this was sort of like, again, the two things I think you hear from people in Boston, from Cabo Verdeans in like the Boston area in New England, when you talk about the language. The first is like mixing between English and Kriolu, like Kringlish, so to speak, as some people would call it. And then the second is like the variation, and whether not in any particular order, but those are sort of the two main things that people recognize as like interesting language aspects of that community. And yeah, I was really interested in the code switching. That sort of became something um, sort of more of a pet project than like the focus of my dissertation. Um, but yeah, I sort of dipped my toe essentially into this field of bilingualism, and it was a very interesting experience. It was also in a lot of ways a very like um, frustrating experience because this field of bilingualism, first of all, the fact that linguistics calls it bilingualism is should tell you a lot, because even though now like we know that in most cases when people talk about bilingualism they mean like multilingualism, we still just use that one term.
Huh. I was actually going to ask you, we might want to like kind of give some definitions for anyone who might not be familiar with what is code switching, what it looks
Right.
like. And then now this is new to me. You saying bilingualism and where they actually mean multiple languages. This is definitely an
Yeah.
interesting concept I hadn't
Yeah.
got into.
So the frustrating aspect of this like field for me is because we are like there are so many terms, and the terms are used in different ways by different people. Um,
Hmm,
and the
interesting.
struggle is that we're trying to apply labels to things that are not um, to things that are much more of a like continuum. We're trying to like place categories and boundaries around things that are actually fluid. Um, so something like, for instance, code switching. Code switching, the sort of traditional understanding of the term is um, mixing between um, two or more like kind of named varieties or named languages or something. So um, there's actually, even another use of the word
Definition.
code switching, which is like when you kind of change the style of, or the dialect maybe from like one setting to another. So that is like one of the main frustrations, right? Is these labels all have
Hmm.
different definitions. But the way that it's used in bilingualism is not the term that we use code switching, like, oh, I code switched in an interview towards a more like interview style. But in
Hmm.
bilingualism, the term code switching is more so I'm intermixing multiple languages like in one sentence.
So like
Um,
you're starting in Creole and finishing in English type of thing? That's
yeah,
what
exactly.
that's the in the bilingualism the definition of code switching because
Right,
you're speaking two languages in one sentence.
right. Um,
S-
the
then I have an interesting question for you because now it's like, what would you call this thing? But go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, yes, I want to hear your follow-up question. But I'll just say the sort of frustrating part about code switching is that then that term itself sort of implies that we are sort of switching, like we're consciously switching between varieties, like when we are intermixing. When in reality, as you mentioned, like your own experience in sort of shifting between different varieties, like you do it unconsciously a lot of times. You can do it consciously, but oftentimes you're not necessarily consciously like, oh, and now I'm going to switch to
Hmm.
English for this verb, and now I'm going
Yes.
to switch to Criolu for this word.
Ain't nobody
Um,
thinking about verbs.
yeah, exactly. People are not,
Nobody.
yeah, but except linguists, linguists are like, oh, they must be doing this
No,
very
that's too
like
funny.
purposefully. Um, So yeah, what was your other
No,
question?
because then like within the Cabo Verdean, I don't know if any of this came up. So uh because of the whole Creole to English things that happen, so certain words were literally created or made up that are not either Creole or English. So for
Mm-hmm.
instance, um
A third thing, a different third
yes,
thing.
it's because of how they pronounce. So when you say trouble, right, in English,
Mm-hmm.
Cabo Verdeans in the United States will say trob, right? So now
Mm-hmm.
they just made up all of that. It's even though they'll have a whole Creole conversation and say, "Você me tem na trob." So in translation, it would
Mm-hmm.
be you're getting yourself into trouble. But they speak in Creole and then they throw in this word that's not it's not English, but it's not Creole neither, but it's a mix of both in a sense. So words like trob,
Mm-hmm.
gabeja, baturumi, but it's not that because they're mispronouncing the English word, it feels like they just created a whole new word. And the reason why it's more of my understanding like this is because we've had friends who were born and raised in the US, Cabo Verdean, parents and grandparents. And when we were in college and having conversation and speaking Creole and then and then we would say, having a we would say, oh, this word means this. And they'll look at us and they're like, what do you mean? That's not like, so now they think the word traba it's a Creole word and not an English word, for instance. So they think that
Mm-hmm.
gabeja, it's a Creole word and not English. That is actually the word garbage that they called gabeja. You know what I mean? So there
Mm-hmm.
are a number of other words that just come up that if the person does not know Creole, Cabo Verdean descendants who do not they're not aware or they don't know the language, they think that these are actually Creole words when they're not at all. And some of our friends found out in college that what they grew up thinking all their lives that some of these words were Creole they were not, and their minds was like, "Whew, what?" So this whole time, so we had to kind of explain some of that, some of that thing, some of those things to them. So what happens when it's that, like the person is speaking in full Creole, and then they throw in a word like gabeja that's really supposed to be garbage? How does that come into play in terms of for linguistics? Like, what do you understand that to be?
Yeah.
Did I
Um,
put you in a hot spot?
yeah. Yeah, no, this is one of my favorite things to think about. So I my specialty or like my focus much more broadly. So I studied Creole languages, but much more broadly, I was interested in language contact and change. Um, and so that was sort of like where I lived for 5 years, was just thinking about these ideas of like, how does language change? And why does language change? Um, and two things that I'll say is that the first thing is that all language changes, right? Um,
Of
there's
course.
no, there's no, and for some reason, people have a lot of opinions about that. They have, we just have this
Interesting.
aversion. We have this aversion to change, and that it like is applied to language often. And when people start to use language differently and kind of allow it to change, people, they have it's like they have frustrations with that. And we do all that we can to like stop language from changing. But it's like trying to stop time. We can't, it's trying to stop, I am going to grow older. I can't stop that.
Yeah.
Language is going to change. We can't stop that.
Language stays and you're not. It's going to keep going. Eventually, you're not going to be on this planet, so you can't stop it, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there is no stopping language change. All language changes, it's natural. And a lot of that change is driven by contact. And that happens like to different degrees in different communities. We might have kind of more subtle language contact and change. We might have more kind of more obvious like change in the sense that it's two very different varieties that come into contact and then exchange things. So an example, of course, would be Creole languages more broadly, right? But then also on like another level, the diaspora community in New England adopting words from English. That's kind of like a very natural progression of just languages living in contact with each other for a long time.
But that
Um,
would not be considered code switching, right? Because you're
yeah,
you're
this is
adapting
where,
you're adapting, but you're not. It's like you're borrowing something, but not completely. It's like you
right.
borrowed the word in English and then you just turned it into something else.
This is where, and I do not envy people who, linguists that like did end up kind of like devoting most of their, I mean, I'm sure they have fun with it, but like devoting most of their career towards these ideas, because you're asking just the right question. These things we can't tease, we want to place hard
Leave them.
boundaries,
Hmm.
but there are no hard boundaries, right? The difference between a word that we've code switched, maybe like a word that is maybe seems more overtly like, okay, I'm saying this word and then I switched to another language for another word. Um, the difference between that and a word that is now like what we would call a borrowing or a loan word
Hmm.
that has been instantiated in the language for a long time to such an extent that maybe speakers of the language don't even know that it's not
It's
a part of the
yes.
language. The difference between those two things is just like time, right? And usage. Um, and so it's more of a continuum. So we have on one end, like the first time maybe that somebody has switched to another language for that particular word, like, maybe like laptops just became a thing and like now someone starts and they use that word in English, laptop, but then laptop becomes much more um, prevalently used, and so on. And then all of a sudden it becomes like lappy toppy.
I was
And
waiting for that. I was like, wait, if she's not going to say it, I'm going to say it.
and
Happy topic. Yes.
is that like a,
Yeah,
I
yes,
just,
because here on this side of the world, right here in Cabo Verde, we've had some of these words where we're borrowing some words in English that are
uh
not changing, which like for instance, workshop. Workshop, we use it all the time now. Like it's part
oh,
of.
wow.
We'll be talking tem um workshop. There is a workshop, so we use workshop
Mm,
constantly, and
mm,
it's just part of. We did not translate it. We're pronouncing it actually workshop. The other one is feedback, even though some people can say feedback, but it's another word. So there are a few English words there that we say in Creole, but this is not new to us. It's just like you said,
mhm,
some folks might not. even realize that we borrowed, the word from English a long time ago because you were born and you found the word as part of your Creole speaking. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
chewinga, which we've highlighted before, with Kriolish is like chewinga comes from chewing gum. I spent most of my life where I had chewinga. I had no idea it came from chewing gum because of mainly British and some American influence that's been in Cabo Verde since, more than 200 years or whatever. It wasn't until I
Yeah,
went to the US that some of these things I'm like, oh my God, like some words is just like, wait, why does that sound familiar to me? And then it came, it made sense eventually. I figured out that's where some of the words came from, but I was born into learn how to say dam shwinga, and that's it. But nobody told me that, hey, Sweetie, that comes from English. No, nobody does that because it's like you said, now it's just part of your language. You don't realize that it's a borrowed word, in this case from English. But now, like, it's English is having a lot more influence in the world. Everybody wants to speak it, so it's spreading faster. So if it's in a dominant sector, especially like technology, it's becoming a thing. Like you start using, English words more than not. Like for instance, if you're doing a presentation, you actually say PowerPoint. Também fazer PowerPoint.
mm-hmm.
So now you're using the name of a product that's an American
Mm-hmm.
product, right? So it's becoming part of it, and it's just part of the language, and we're not even, nobody's arguing about it. Like nobody's saying, hey, we shouldn't, well, we should. It's just now it's a natural flow that's happening here. But I think technology in general, because of chats and all these apps, is just one is changing Creole altogether. Because I think somebody needs to come and do a study here of the new generation. Because
I bet.
when they write, like they shorten Creole, which I feel sometimes is already shortened. They shorten Creole, and I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea what you're saying. It's the same thing that's happening with English in the US, right? Technology is making, the younger generation with access to phones and whatnot, they shorten the language. It's like shorthand writing now, tech version. So same thing is happening with Creole here, that they just shorten the Creole. It's crazy the way that they type it. And I'm like, I really have to sit down and try to understand what these kids are, young teenagers are writing. So that's already changing because of technology. So technology is making a change. Like you're saying, some people are, they don't want a change to happen. Guess what? It's happening whether you want to or not. And technology now is playing a huge role in all of it. So it'll be interesting to see, like in 5, 10 years, the young ones, the teenagers now, when they're adults, how they feel about it. Because then they go into the adult
Mm-hmm.
world, they go into the corporations and the whatever companies. Do they adjust, or are they the ones changing how things are going to be from now on? So it would be interesting to see if somebody would do some research in like 5, 10 years with a new generation going in, how they were exposed to language with technology and how they're doing it now, as adults.
Yeah.
So maybe research for another 10 years, Sophie. It's like, let me
That's the
go back to
next
those people that I interviewed. Not
the
bad. When you're
next
bored,
PhD.
if you're bored, Sophie, if you're bored, you can keep doing research on Cabo Verde Creole. You'll be fine. You'll find something to
It's
do.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt. I'm fully aware. This could take you, and that's how research goes, is you're just like, I have this one thing, then you find out there's 10 more PhDs that you could do. Um,
Yes. So would you say because of this, especially because of technology and like the research that you're doing and the way that you see, with the concept of a language evolving for Cabo Verdean Creole, do you think is in the diaspora is dying or is just evolving? In the diaspora, obviously, in this case, you only did New England, it's a smaller sample. But from your take,
right.
and even from whatever readings and other researches you've done, do you think it's dying or is simply evolving, but it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, I think I I'm not, maybe the best person like to like just blanket say, whether like
How you feel
Creole is
about
going to
it?
stick around. But at least from, my experience
Yeah.
in New England, I mean, it's still huge. Like it's still being, it's like uh, a lot of people's first language still, or one of their first languages still. I mean, one of the reasons that I also wanted to do this research, and I knew that this research was going to be like um, basically possible for something like a dissertation, is that there were still, a lot of people, like, there's still so much back and forth between um, the diaspora and Cabo Verde. And we go through, different periods in the US where there's like more or less immigration, and then like maybe more or less like back and forth in terms of travel. But historically, like, we have gone through those periods before. So I do believe that like it's kind of like swayed back and forth. So even if there is maybe like a lull or something like that will bounce back. And in terms of this particular community, I feel like the kind of connection to the culture and the language and the community is just like so uniquely strong, that I don't see the language going anywhere, personally. Um, and the fact that it might be changing, as a result of contact between English, as a result of contact with, different varieties of Kriolu, as we also talked about. That's, again, that is like natural. That's just like all language is going to do that. And that is not the language dying. That is the language, as you said, like evolving, right? And even I think in this case, and in most cases, um, a a community or a language like resisting that change is actually like going to be worse for the longevity of the language uh, in any case. So like kind of allowing that change while still maintaining connection to the language, I think, as the community seems to be doing already, is going to keep the language around.
And before I go into a little bit about you teaching Creole in the classroom, I think something to think about or keep in mind is, what you just said right now. You said, you have immigration, coming or going, or more or less, people traveling. But what we didn't have before that we have now is technology. You might not migrate, but
Exactly.
the technology, I feel, is not gonna let you lose it as long as it keeps
Mm-hmm.
going. Everybody's learning English, for instance. That's a big thing. Like the internet is English, right? It's most content online, it's all English. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the work, obviously, some of the work that we're doing. We're trying to make sure that we don't get buried into this internet world of only English. But at the same time, I feel like because of technology, because now you can talk instantly with anybody, anywhere, any family members, anywhere in the diaspora, from Cabo to the diaspora, from diaspora to diaspora, that's
Mm-hmm.
not what's going to allow uh, the language to die so soon, because then now you're exposed to other things that's happening and another diaspora. Like what is the European diaspora doing? Cabo Verdean. We have Cabo Verdeans in New Zealand. We have Cabo Verdeans in Australia that are like second, third generation that are discovering the language, and because of technology, now they're learning it, and that might be that they're about to feed a whole new, generation the language that before was not possible. So I think the technology is like, how do we maximize it to not lose it and staying afloat with it and not get lost in what technology brings, because a lot of it's bringing more English to people, but we can make sure it also stays with Cabo Verde and Creole. We don't get lost in it. So that's a big thing that we keep in mind, here in Criolish. Um, the other big part, obviously, we mentioned earlier, you are an assistant visiting professor. So right now you're teaching uh Kriolu, or about Creole in the classroom, because then we'll go into you learning Creole from Santiago course. We'll get into that in a little bit. But how is it now you teaching, like a little bit about what is it that you're doing as a visiting professor in regards to Creole?
Yeah. So as someone who, specializes in Creole languages, that's definitely Creoles in general. I bring into my teaching regularly. That's also kind of a privilege of mine. Is just that I have that kind of like expertise, so I can bring that in, and it's also like it's easier for me to talk about Creoles than other things because I know more about them. So for me, I bring that into the classroom, uh, just kind of as a part of my regular teaching practice. But I bring Kriolu specifically into the classroom a lot, again, also because that was my research. And so I do that in a couple different ways. One, I taught a course on Creole languages. So I taught an upper level seminar that was actually, um, we had 25 students, I think, and I think I had
I was
26.
I was going to ask,
Um,
I'm like, what's your classroom size? Like, how many
that
people
was
are
a
really
that was a
interested?
seminar. That was a seminar, so it was a small kind of
A
discussion
smaller
style classroom. And this school is on the smaller side in
size.
terms of other universities. But the students were really excited. They were really excited. And what's interesting and what's cool about teaching at this school is that a lot of these people, like, as opposed to maybe people in Boston, they have very little exposure to Creole languages, and they
Mm-hmm.
certainly do not know much about Cabo Verde. And so, but they're really excited to learn. And so we would learn about kind of my approach that I took was kind of talking a little bit about how linguistics has studied Creole languages throughout history, but then really just spending each kind of class day, so it was twice a week, each class day we would learn about a Creole language. And
Mm.
so that way they were exposed to kind of like
Disposed,
this
of course.
wide breadth, because
Broader.
I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the kind of commonalities for people, and maybe common like limitations that people have in terms of like their scope of Creoles and language, is that for a lot of people, they hear Creole and they think maybe one or two languages. They're like, either they know about
Haitian
maybe
Creole. Okay.
Louisiana or Haitian. It's like
Yes.
Haitian is really common, especially in Boston.
Yes.
Or, a lot of Americans, they just think Cajun,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Louisiana.
Louisiana, yes, yeah. You're right on that one.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so my goal was really to like expose them to the widest breadth, so that they could see the variation, like they could see the diversity and the variation. Um, and uh, and then one of the projects that I work on with my advisors lab was this initiative that we're trying to incorporate Creoles into more aspects of linguistics teaching and minoritized languages in general. Because what we found is that in a lot of linguistics teaching, we will say that, all languages are like equal, like, and so on and so forth, but we don't necessarily practice what we preach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we say that we should treat them all equally. Um, and like as like they all have fully, they all have grammar, like they all have the same linguistic capacity, but we're not necessarily incorporating them into all aspects of linguistics teaching as if they have the same
The
linguistic
same.
capacity. So we're not using Creoles as examples in like a syntax class. We're using maybe more, I don't know, like languages that are not like historically minoritized, like English, for instance. Um, and so with this group, we are creating these resources, and this goes off a little bit like in the vein of Criolish, of like, hey, one of the issues is that we don't actually have the resources to teach about these languages because we don't have the like material. In much the same way of
Yes,
like, okay, maybe one of the issues that people can't learn Creole, like Criolu, is because we don't have the courses, right?
the course. Mm-hmm.
And so with this group, one of the aspects was just creating the material of like, okay, if they're having trouble incorporating Creoles into syntax classes, we'll create syntax like homeworks and problem sets.
Materials. Mm-hmm.
hmm And like maybe they don't know enough about Creoles. Um, we will, interview Creole Creole speakers and Creole speaking, Creole community members and Creole experts, and we'll post these interviews on this website that we have. And that way, if a teacher is ever like, I don't know, this is my expertise, they can play this video where an expert actually does talk about this. So kind of,
That's
again, like you were talking about,
getting
using
creative
technology.
technology
Yeah.
for, yes. Oh, that's good.
Um,
That's pretty. I'm glad you all are able to get on that and touch on the issues of what's not happening in the classrooms with teaching foreign languages or linguistics and how it comes about. So I'm happy to know that there are 25 you know Sophie products coming out.
oh,
Hopefully
yes.
they're all gonna come out one
And
day. It's
more
like
because
I had Professor Sophie.
no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm glad. That's good. We're coming up to the hour. So one important thing is that, okay, you as a professor teaching about all this stuff, you started, like you said, it was during the pandemic. You were online learning, started learning Creole before, and now, what is this? 5 years, 6 years later? I lost track of time since pandemic. Now you just recently, took, or at least started, our Santiago Beginner's Course
Hmm.
with with us on our, in our platform. So I'm going to read your testimonial, which is on our online now, with your testimonial this past week on social media. But I'm going to read what you said because I think it's so interesting, because it's an issue even for Cabo Verdean. So you said, one of my biggest issues learning Criolu was never feeling confident in my spelling or pronunciation. That's an interesting thing for somebody who's, learning it. Cabo Verdeans right now, I mean, we speak it. The spelling is becoming a thing for us because now, with technology, people are spelling it, and we can see that nobody really, we have not learned the alphabet, the Cabo Verdean alphabet collectively as a nation. So that's a whole thing for us, right? That's a whole new, ball game, and something that's going to happen with the next generation of them understanding that there's an alphabet, and how do we actually use it. But it's a thing for us too, like spelling it now. Like, I'm very conscious when I'm writing. I'm like, oh my God, did I spell it right? And I'm still learning the spelling of of Creole. For you, how was it, like, the difference when you first started and now taking the Santiago Beginner Course, and this whole thing of the confidence between pronunciation and spelling?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. For me, having access to, I think we've talked, and you talk with like pretty much any, or a lot of Cabo Verdeans, this like question of like developing the orthography and having some norms, as you've mentioned, is like challenging, and like there's like also kind of mixed feelings about that. Um, as a learner, I would say it's very helpful to have kind of a resource that has some consistency that you can kind of use that as a reference to build on. Um, I think this happens with like learning any language, right? I'm also learning Spanish right now. And, you sort of have to have that mixture of like learning maybe one, variety to start, and like one sort of like system to start, and then like encourage, and then like being exposed to all the
It's
actual
all this.
variation, you
You're
know?
in a mess right now if you're learning Spanish and then you're learning Creole. It's all
It's
going
like
to
both.
be
Both of
you're gonna
them
be
are.
yeah. It's gonna be interesting. You're probably mixing things up. You're like, wait, I can't. My brain can't tell the difference.
Yeah, I'm sure. No, already my Spanish teacher is like, Are you learning Portuguese?" And I was like, "No, don't worry about it."
That is awesome. That's a good sign that the Santiago course is doing something, that your teacher's questioning what exactly are you learning.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um,
That's awesome.
but yeah, having some sort of resource that in which I can go back and I can like replay different clips that will like show me or kind of give me an example of like what is the pronunciation and so on, is really helpful. Um, yeah, especially things like the vowels and things like that. I never know, for instance, how the E is pronounced, or like how the A is pronounced, or the O. It's like it seems different every time. So having some place that I can go back to like have that consistency is incredibly helpful.
and and I think this, like, if any Cabo Verdean native decides, and that speaks English, obviously, decides to take the course, and they've never really spoken Santiago, we have some Vicentes coming up, but if they've never spoken either one and they decide to take, I feel like they're gonna feel like they're learning almost learning a new language because there are so many nuances to all of this stuff. And then, obviously the vocabulary and then expressions, all of this go into play when you're learning a language. Like what I say in Sal does not mean it's the same expression, for another island. So there's so much in the learning that, when you grew up in Cavite or even in the diaspora where you are exposed to the language, you speak it, you go about your life, but you don't stop to think about what's really happening. Like you're picking up language, you're picking up a particular expression, you're picking up a particular way of even saying things or how you say it. So I think
Mm-hmm.
even for Cabo Verdeans, if they decided to take this course, they will probably be surprised, like, oh my God, like there's a lot more about my language that I need to know that I don't know. And I mean, and that's an okay thing right now, a feeling to have because it's been an oral language for more than 500 years, right? Like actually writing it, even when you could see it in writing in music, but even if you go check the writing in music, it's not, equivalent to the current alphabet that we have in place, that in the law,
Mm-hmm.
for the Cabo Verdean alphabet. So it's not, but it's Creole that's written in a way, but it's the influence of Portuguese that in terms of spelling, even though when you read it, you're reading Creole, right? But it's weird how your brain works and what it understands and what it process even for your own language. So it's like you will have this in common with Cabo Verdeans. If somebody decides to take the Santiago course and then not from Santiago, you will probably sit down and have very
Mm-hmm.
common, like, oh my God, I didn't even know that's how you spell that. Yes, that is definitely a thing. Even for me, like again, I spell sometimes and I edit, like I'll send a text in Creole and I'm like, that's not how you spell it, and I'll edit and I'll put something else. I'm like, wait, did I get the right accent? And that's a whole other conversation that stuff that we're bringing up about certain things that is currently in place for Kavir, like for Cabo Verdean Creole, how do we contribute to the evolution of the language to make it better and easier to understand and easy to learn? Because it changes,
Mm-hmm.
the change is happening, right? So how do we make sure that it's happening in the right direction, kind of thing. So that's the fun part about Criolish is that there's so much work that we need to do that needs to get done, but it's the fun in it. It's like, I mean, I'm a nerd when it comes down to this type of stuff and language and history and culture. And then you have Edmar, who's a nerd as a tech guy and
And
doing
the
his coding. So
computers.
it's a great match. And then you up and you were part of our team, and you will always be a special person for us on your side of linguistics nerding. Like I'm all about this stuff. Like I get too excited and can talk for a very long time about these things. But I'm happy to, for us, we were happy that the course meant that for you, like, helping you build on your confidence, especially because it's a field that you're going to be in for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
at least as long as you can, as long as you can see at the moment. So it helps you as well with your professional development and anything else that you're doing for the Creole language community. So that makes us happy, just so you know.
Oh, well, it's an incredible resource. I mean, talk about using technology for the good of language and also encouraging the longevity of a language too, right? Part of what helps to kind of maintain the like strength and longevity of a language is creating resources for it. Allowing like creating resources to learn it for people that don't speak it and for people that no longer are anywhere near Boston. I'm in Washington right now. So the fact that I can like learn Kriolu from Bellingham, Washington is pretty incredible.
Yes, that is, and I'm pretty sure there's probably some connection to some Cabo Verdean who went to that side. I know they were in the 1800s Cabo Verdean out in Oregon, so it's like
Oh,
the
really?
first the first black resident. I think it was in Oregon. He was Cabo Verdean, had a barbershop, like all of that. It's like he's well documented. There's a whole bunch of
Wow.
stuff. Like there's Cabo Verdeans out in the West Coast, and then there's a bunch of Cabo Verdean descendants in California. So we are all over the place. And yet, obviously these resources are not going to be in person. And hopefully with Kriolish,
Mhm.
we'll be able to extend and like you said, you're all the way over there, and yet if you want to pick up or continue and somehow practice. Now you just need to find a Criolu or two so you can practice in person. Go drink a coffee or a tea or something. Maybe I should find
Mhm.
some friends out there. See if I have somebody out in the West Coast to like, hey, I have somebody learning Creole. Go sit with them. Y'all go learn together. I'm sure I'll
There's
find
gotta be
somebody.
somebody in
I'm
Seattle.
sure. Do
It's a
not
big it's
challenge
a
me,
big
Sophie. If you challenge me, I'm gonna go look for somebody. I'm gonna find somebody.
Swaley knows
now I'm on.
everybody,
Now
so
I'm on a,
I'd
I'm on a mission. But this is a great way for us to wrap this up. The longevity, thinking about the next generation. I think we are in the right course, and it feels good to know that there are folks like you out there who can, a new generation of researchers and looking at it from a different, perspective. And even as someone from the outside, it helps us think differently, and it forces you to think different because when you are part of something, it's hard for you to see what needs to be adjusted, what needs to be better. And when you have somebody from the outside asking you questions, you're like, I never thought about that. Um,
Mhm.
so it's good to have you as part of a community of, folks who've been around, Cabo Verdeans who've been around doing the research, and now coming in with a different perspective or a different look on it, and us coming in with the technology part of it. So this is all exciting for us, and there's a lot to get done. But the good part is that people are open to it, and then that's what makes us excited. Folks who are open to the idea, open to exploring and letting us know what's not working or what's missing, so that we can, we as Criolish can contribute to what's missing out there right now to make sure that our language does not disappear as long as we're around. Is that it? Well, we gonna keep it there as long as we can.
Mhm.
We'll do our part. We'll do our part. Well, thank you, Sophie. Thank you so much for your time. It's I know we could have talked a lot more, but yeah, I think an hour it's a good time. I think this is a good time.
Yeah, we should,
Yeah.
yeah, spare
Maybe
the
we can do
attention
part
span
two.
also.
We can, there's always part.
Yes.
We can always come back. It's not like this is a one and done. I'm sure we'll find
Mm.
another topic that we can bring you in and have you, talk some more, and we can do more of this, more of these podcast conversation on other nerdy linguistic things. I love it. Thank you
I
once
would love it
again,
too.
and enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and especially being a Sunday. Thank you for making the time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yay!
Anytime. All
Bye.
right.
Take care.
Thanks,
We'll
Swaley.
talk. Bye.
Bye.